All right, so we'll be looking at the rest of the Echinoderm classes in this video. We're going to look at three more classes. First is Echinoidea. These are sea urchins and sand dollars, approximately 950 species of them. Urchins usually prefer hard areas to live on, whereas sand dollars, you might be shocked, prefer sandy areas so they can burrow. They have a compact, enclosed body in kind of a shell. The technical term for that is a test. And so they have this body that is enclosed in this test with really tightly fitting dermal ossicles. So they still have the endoskeleton thing going on, but this is a tighter kind of structure. They don't have arms, but they still have that pentaradial symmetry that you see in other echinoderms as well. They move with their tube feet, and so there's the pentaradial symmetry that you can see. They move with their tube feet, and so these things do move. They're not just underwater surf souvenirs. They do move, and they can use their spines to move, like you see this sea urchin moving here, or they just kind of plow their way through the sand, like you see this sand dollar moving here, never getting to its destination. It's just trying to burrow and get to a safe place. Some urchins are what are called soft tested. They have a reduced test, but they're usually brightly colored, and you can see that here. That is a sea urchin. And they have aposematic coloration. If you remember, this is like warning coloration, warning others to stay away because they're poisonous. Don't come eat me because I will get you. And that's essentially what that color is saying. Leave me alone. All right. So a couple things here as far as their digestion is concerned. They have something called Aristotle's lantern. I have no idea why it's called that, but it's basically like kind of like a garbage disposal inside of them. It's like a chewing mechanism that that can be extruded from their body in order to kind of grind up the food. There's a siphon that connects to the esophagus into the small intestines, allows water to kind of bypass the stomach, and so that food can be concentrated and grinded up appropriately. And their diet is omnivorous. They will eat pretty much whatever they can fit inside their little lantern here and just grind it all up to nothing. And here's some sand dollars feeding, which so there's a sand dollar. Look at them with their tube feet. Like come over here, little guys, and you can see all the little shrimps and things moving into their mouth to get grinded up. All right, so the next class is called Holothrodia. These are sea cumbers and other oddities, is what I wrote in my notes. 1,150 species of these guys. Ossicles are reduced on most, and so a lot of these are softer bodied. Their skin is kind of leathery, so it still has this some structure to it, but it's more of a leathery kind of a structure. They have more elongated bodies that allow them to crawl on the seafloor and burrow. Their coelom acts as kind of a hydrostatic skeleton. that was kind of funny. Hydrostatic skeleton. They're able to evert portions of their insides actually as defense mechanisms, and so they can kind of just blow themselves up in order to keep something from eating it, which is really, really strange. Um, so they form commensal relationships with some fish in which the fish will actually inhabit the cloaca of the sea cucumber. And so, yeah, the echinoderm doesn't get any benefit from this, but I'm assuming the fish has some protection here. And so, yeah, this is one of the more interesting commensalism relationships in the animal kingdom. So, yeah. And then the last class that we're going to look at is Cronordia. These are sea lilies and feather stars. They're 625 species of them, a lot more numerous in the past. So the fossil evidence is that these were one time a bigger species than they are currently. They mostly live their whole lives attached to something, though they are able to move if necessary. So not a whole lot to mention there. So a little bit about their phylogeny here. Let's talk about that. Once as many as 20 classes of echinoderms, now only 5 remaining, the ones that we went over. The first echinoderms were probably sessile, and so they just kind of stuck to their own place, but eventually were able to move, and they arose in the first split between protostomes and deuterostomes, which we will talk about that distinction as we get to chordates. And basically the protostome is where the mouth is developed first, and you see this with more simpler organisms, and then the deuterostome is where the anus is developed first. And so then you have a split between echinoderms and chordates. And so echinoderms represent the closest relative to chordates that are not chordates. And so we're going to talk about arthropods before we move on to chordates, but this is kind of the last link before we get into chordates, which most chordates are vertebrates, and that is what people typically think of when they think of